please do so. I can pass it around, or feel free to get it on your way out. And for those joining in remotely, if you would drop your email into the chat, so we have a record of that. And believe, Megan, have you started recording?
Yes, I have.
Great. All right. Thanks. This presentation, the meeting, will be recorded and will be made available. We'll post it on our website after this. Like we got a couple folks still joining. Our agenda for this morning, we'll have a presentation on the intended use plans from 10 to 11, covering the clean water, IUP and priority list, followed by the drinking water, followed by updates from our design and construction engineering program. And then we'll take questions at the end of the presentation. If you've got any questions along the way, just sort of quick clarifying questions, feel free to jump in. And then from 11 to 12, we'll take comments on the IUPs and the priority list. Any questions before we get rolling? All good? Our timeline for the intended use plans, public comment can be submitted until a week from today, August 8th. You can email them to me at patrick.monks@vermont.gov. We're also taking comments today at the meeting. Final IUPs, which will include a response to all public comments received. Goal is to have that out by the middle of this month. Depends on the extent of comments, as always. And then once the IUPs are adopted, we'll provide funds availability letters to projects that are above, construction projects that are above the funding line. Some big picture updates for the program. As you know, we've received these last few years additional grants from EPA under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is also known as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also called IIJA. That provided 5 new grants. This is year 4 of 5. So next year will be our last year of those receiving those additional funds. Those additional funds are, referred to. We've got our supplemental grant on both drinking water and clean water side. Emerging contaminants grants also on both clean water and drinking water, and then also our lead service line grant on the drinking water side. CDS, congressionally directed spending, also referred to as earmarks, affected last year's base grants, where Congress handled those CDS grants last year. Was they took all the eligible, all the grants that were eligible either for clean water or drinking water SRF nationally. Those combined dollars were taken from the national allocation for the base SRF grants, which and then the grants are handed out following the usual distribution methodology. And what that meant for Vermont was a significantly reduced base grants under both programs. That did not happen this year because CDS didn't happen under the current budget, federal budget. It may happen next year. We'll see. Fortunately, we do have at least one more year of those additional supplemental grants. Generally, the IUPs are very similar to last year. No big changes. One of the more significant changes, though, is on the clean water side, where for planning and design, we had multiple different subsidy categories. We condensed those into 1 or 2, and I'll get into more detail on the specifics there. All right, starting with the clean water IUP. First off, our sources of funding. This table is straight out of the IUP. The top row, top green row, identifies the amount we're receiving under each of the grants. For the base grant, also referred to as the general grant, $7.8 million. Under the general supplemental, which supplements the base grant, just over 12 million. Emerging contaminants, 1,097,000. The next row covers the match that's required. It's a 20% match for the general and general supplemental grants. No match required for emerging contaminants. All repayments from prior loans are tracked under our general grant. That's that $10,438,000 figure. Then interest, which is similarly just tracked under the general grant, 4.8 million. And then carry forward refers to the funds that we have available from prior years, prior repayments, et cetera. And the bottom row totals up the funds available. This table summarizes those values for general supplemental emerging contaminants combined, 131,119,000 plus. We've got a funding request of over 300 million, which leaves a funding shortfall of 169,710,000. That total funding request, we don't really ever see the full demand that's identified in the priority list applications. Not all projects go forward. Additionally, if you look at the priority list, the funding line is lower than 131 million. I think it's closer to 180 million. And that is based on our understanding of projects that are based on our understanding of their schedule and their likelihood of going forward. So where for some of the projects above the funding line, there's a good likelihood that they're securing other funding or are not going forward. So therefore, the funding line was drawn lower to provide funding for more projects. All projects that are seeking construction funding need to submit a priority list application, and those on the clean water side, those projects are ranked using the Environmental Protection Rule Chapter 2, and that regulates priority list application ranking. Points are based on 9 categories, including public health, water quality, affordability, project readiness. For folks online, if you would mute your mics. Anyone have their screen available to mute? Yeah. Hi, Pia, can you mute your mic?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. And that the Chapter 2 ranking criteria are also used for calculating pollution control grant eligibility percentage. The results of all that ranking is our priority list, which identifies construction projects in the fundable range. All right, another big piece of the IUP is the additional subsidy available. Additional subsidy refers to loan principal forgiveness. The grants that we receive from EPA identify how much subsidy we can make available under each of the grants or are required to make available. Under the general grant, 778,800 is available with no restrictions, meaning projects recipients do not need to meet affordability criteria. And there's another 1.6 million available for projects that do meet affordability criteria. Under the general supplemental grant, we've got 5.9 million, and all that subsidy does need to go to projects meeting affordability criteria. On the drinking water side, we refer to disadvantaged communities. It's essentially a similar concept, slightly different criteria. Emerging contaminants, the entire grant, 100% of the grant, 1,043,000. We're required to make that available in the form of subsidy, 100% forgiven. The bottom row, 2023 emerging contaminants, that refers to reallotted funds. So when other states don't take a given year's grant, it becomes available for the rest of the states. And so we have an additional 54,000 coming under the emerging contaminants grant program, also being made available as subsidy. So again, the grants identify the amount of subsidy we can make available, and then the IUP describes our plan for using that subsidy. Under the general and general supplemental grants, we plan to make just over $1 million available for planning, no restrictions. There's $500,000 continuing our program for floodplain buyouts. There's $10,353,000 available for construction for projects meeting affordability criteria. And we've extended our Lakes in Crisis program and identified $100,000 available there. On the clean water side, the IUP identifies that all funds will be available for construction. We don't actually have full demand for the grant identified in terms of construction projects. So we are likely, the final intended use plan will likely make the balance of what we have identified in terms of construction demand available as for planning and design. So I think roughly we've looked at what for Franklin is like 400,000 or 500,000.
Mm-hmm.
So then the balance of that, roughly 500,000, will be available for planning and design, or for other construction projects that might come in during the year if we are to amend the priority list. Again, if you're familiar with our existing intended use plan, we have multiple planning categories. On the clean water side, planning and design categories, we have for this year, all planning, which includes preliminary engineering and final design. We're offering 50% subsidy up to $100,000 per project. We also have our floodplain restoration subsidy, which offers up to $250,000 per project. And that's dependent on whether that project is eligible for FEMA funding and also if it's in a manufactured housing community. For construction subsidy, using the general supplemental grants, it's 50% up to $1 million per project. Project, again, must meet affordability criteria. Emerging contaminants, 100%, all eligible projects. To qualify for subsidy on the clean water side, you need to be a municipality. Subsidies reserved for an application based on receipt of that loan application, funding application, having completed the qualifications-based selection process, submitted a draft engineering services agreement, and continuing to meet readiness to proceed criteria, which we'll identify a few slides down. Subsidy is not guaranteed until the loan's been approved, and we've issued an authorized letter of funding letter. We're continuing to offer funding for natural infrastructure, including traditional loans for conservation and restoration projects. We're offering an interim finance put aside. That's for projects seeking to conserve land that are looking for finance prior to securing long-term funding. And we're also continuing our water infrastructure sponsorship program, also called WHISPER. It took us a good few years to stand this project up. We eventually got it staffed. Catherine King in the Water Investment Division, or in the Basin Planning Program, manages that program for us, and we've got a few projects going. She works with our project developer and engineers in identifying suitable projects. The way this program works is that a traditional municipal SRF project sponsors a natural resource project. And in so doing, they're able to secure an additional 10% of the loan value that can be applied to that project. Say you're a municipal wastewater treatment plant project, you decide you want to sponsor a buffer restoration project, the loan value can be increased by 10%, and then the admin fee is reduced such that the repayment amount is no greater. And on top of that, there's an additional 0.1% administrative fee reduction as an incentive for those projects. All right, that wraps up the clean water side. Moving on to drinking water. Did I skip the MS4 grant program? I did not do that on purpose. The intended use plan, thank you. Thanks. The intended use plan also identifies our MS4 stormwater funding grant program. This is a new program developed in partnership with the Basin Program, where a few years ago we secured funds, and those funds are being made available this year. I believe this is 2 years worth of funding that constitutes the $3 million that's available. It's funding's made available for MS4 municipalities. MS4 stands for the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System program. Those are communities that are regulated under the Federal Clean Water Act for their stormwater discharges. These funds are made available for the MS4 municipalities that are implementing either a phosphorus control plan related to the Lake Champlain phosphorus TMDL or flow restoration plans to address stormwater in streams. Again, there's $3 million available under this intended use plan. The projects that are seeking construction funding need to be on the priority list. And this program was designed to make the grant funds available essentially in the form of subsidy under a traditional clean water SRF loan. At this point, none of the stormwater projects are above the funding line. So that certainly creates a challenge for us to continue the program as it was initially designed. Our plan is to, once we send out the funds availability letters, we typically hear back from some borrowers who may or may not be going forward. So then the funding line effectively drops yet lower. Once we've completed that, which should be, later this month, we'll know which, if any, of the stormwater, the MS4 projects are eligible. And if we do have sufficient demand, we'll continue, under the model that we've described here. If we're still running into issues where essentially these projects don't rank high enough to apply for an SRF loan, we may move it to be either defer it a year or move it to be more of just a traditional grant program. If we do that, we will resolicit priority list applications, just so that all potential applicants have adequate notice. All right, now drinking water. Just like the clean water side, this table, our sources of funding comes from straight out of the intended use plan. Our general grant, or our base grant, 7.5 million. The general supplemental grant, so over 17 million. Lead service line grant, we are not applying for this year. We still have ample funding available under our existing grant that we applied for under 2022. And if by chance we were to make full use of the existing available funds under lead service line grant, we still have next year's grant that we can apply for. So no shortage of lead service line grant funds. Emerging contaminants, $5.5 million. Again, the second row covers the match required. For the grants, there's no match required for emerging contaminants. Payments, 6.6 million, again, are tracked under the base grant. Same with interest, 2.9 million. And then our carry forward funds and bottom row are the total funds we have available for projects this year. This table summarizes that for the general, supplemental, and emerging contaminants combined. There is 111,444,000 available, total funding request of 153 million, leaving a shortfall of 41 million. So less of a gap than on the clean water side. Lead service lines, we actually have a funding surplus of over $10 million. Similar to the clean water side, we use ranking criteria to determine the priority list scores for projects seeking construction funding. In the case of drinking water, it's under guidance document 2, not a rule. The priority ranking criteria, there's 6 ranking categories, including the number of service connections, affordability and service area, and deficiencies in compliance. The subsidy available based on the terms of the grants that we've applied for. General grant, we have $1.5 million available for we call ad sub anyone, where there's no restrictions, and 3.8 million for disadvantaged communities. General supplemental grant, 12.2 million, and under the terms of the grant, all that is required to go to communities meeting our disadvantaged community definition. And emerging contaminants, almost $7 million. In effect, there's no income restrictions, but 25% of the subsidy must go to disadvantaged communities or systems serving less than 25,000 persons, just because almost all our systems serve less than 25,000 persons. We don't typically run into any issues there. Total available subsidy on the drinking water side, $24.5 million. So, again, looking ahead next year, we still anticipate receiving the general supplemental and emerging contaminants grants. But the year after that, we'll be back to the base grants. Now, what the level of funding under those base grants and the amount of subsidy that'll be available is really anyone's guess at this point. Our proposal for the use of the subsidy to provide $2.4 million for planning, $9.4 million for construction under the general grant, general supplemental, all will go to construction for disadvantaged communities, 12.2 million. Lead service lines, both planning and construction are eligible, $9.3 million. Emerging contaminants, $795,000 for planning and $6.2 million for construction. Total available subsidy, again, $33.9 million. In terms of the specifics for the general supplemental grants, this is all for planning. 25% forgiveness up to $100,000. Lead service lines, it's 100% forgiveness up to $100,000. 50% over $100,000. Again, for disadvantaged communities. Emerging contaminants, 100% forgiveness. For construction subsidy, general supplemental, for disadvantaged communities up to 50%. Lead service lines also up to 50%. Emerging contaminants, again, 100%, but there's a $5 million cap per borrower. I mentioned readiness to proceed criteria. These refer to projects that are above the funding line to ensure that those projects are moving along and to provide us the opportunity to make funding available to other projects where these projects aren't moving forward. We have readiness to proceed criteria. They include submitting a step 2 loan application by November 1 and submitting a complete environmental information document by December 1. On the drinking water side, projects are required to submit 90% design drawings or have a construction permit by January 1 of 2026. Both programs, bond vote needs to be scheduled, copy of warning submitted to us by January 31st, 2026. Need voter or board debt authorization by May 1 and submit a complete step 3, that is a construction loan funding application by June 30th, 2026, which is the end of the state fiscal year. All right, so that in a nutshell are the clean water and drinking water intended use plan highlights. Going to hand it over to our design and construction engineering section. Go over a few of their slides, program updates. And again, we can take any questions at the end.
Thanks, Patrick. I'm Lynette Flitto, the design chief. My colleague.
I'm Don Paddox.
Construction chief. So for design announcement reminders, we would like you to please use the loan deliverables submittal through the A&R document portal. It does have a size limit. You are not notified if the submittal that you make goes over the size limit. So you should just make sure that you check in with us that, we got your document. This, similarly, the, clean water project priority points and the PPL applications, have been a arduous process for review. This last year was the first year where we reviewed, most of the questions, changing, no answers to yes answers as applicable. But we only reviewed through criterion 4. So some applications were not fully reviewed, so there may still be additional modifications as you go into final design. In terms of your accepted priority points, we were last year requiring, that borrowers, complete a project priority list application in draft as part of their preliminary engineering report, in order to document those points that are documented in the PER to make future applications easier. Just a reminder that design section is using the in our online portal for draft engineering services agreements and middles. We have some updates on our work that is in progress. As you may recall, the fee curve guidance document number 9 was posted for public comment during last year. That was not finalized, but the update is still in progress. We've made really good work on the updates to the federal requirement, which will end up being guidance document 39, but for right now, it's available if you email Dawn. We also are still finalizing our MOU with SHPO, but expect that to be done soon. So there's a new section 106 consultation form that's been in use for the last year. Hopefully you've all seen it. But it is required, with your SHPO submittal. It is a, living document, so we expect you to submit it with every new, submittal for SHPO. And lastly, we're introducing the equivalency concept to queue up Dawn's slide. Equivalency is a federal SRF concept, that applies to our federal capitalization grant and is defined in our intended use plan. The equivalency concept allows SRF programs across the country, to use a certain amount of funding up to the amount of the federal capitalization grant, the base grant, as Patrick has been discussing. It allows us to report that amount and an equivalent amount for projects to the federal reporting database, fundamentally allowing us to use the federal cap grant in a more fluid way, while reporting out on the federal use of an equivalent number of dollars. And that allows us to have more flexibility with some of the cost cutter requirements.
So I am Don Haddock's, like when I said, if you guys don't know me, and it's my turn to read a slide to all of you. Our staffing levels remain probably not where we wish they could be, and that will continue to have some impacts on review times. And of course, impacts on review times lead to impacts on your projects. We have made a lot of progress though. We brought on another construction engineer, swiped her right out of the drinking water program, and I'm sure all of you guys know Allison. But she's very rapidly coming up to speed on stuff, and I am really optimistic that by the end of this construction season, the construction section of WID would be operating at just about peak levels, and that would be pretty great for everybody, us and you guys. BABA requirements, there's a little detail in BABA that seems to be wildly misunderstood, that BABA has somehow supplanted or replaced AIS, when in fact that is not accurate. AIS remains in force, even in the face of BABA. So in most situations, if you are compliant with BABA, you are automatically compliant with AIS requirements. But if you were granted a BABA waiver for one of a million reasons, it seems, that does not imply that you have an AIS waiver for projects. That's a really tiny detail with huge implications for every project. If there's any question about that on your specific project, clean water or drinking water, I strongly urge you to seek clarity from whatever construction engineer you're working with. If you can't get it, then seek clarity from me, please. BABA does only apply to equivalency projects. I don't really know what that means, but you can ask Patrick and Lynette, and they're really good at defining that equivalency stuff. If you ask me, I would say, please ask Lynette or Patrick, and that would be great. I did talk about briefly there the myriad ways that there seem to be right now to get an adjustment period waiver. Those are starting to phase out, if you don't know that, because one of the components of the adjustment period waiver is when you are being funded. Those funding years being fiscal year 22 and 23 are simply running out of money at this point. If you aren't being funded by that, you're not going to be in the future, to the best of my understanding. And therefore, the ability to get an adjustment period waiver is also going by the wayside. We are now creeping quickly into the year 2018 and accepting ESAs and engineering services agreements, as opposed to only 2013, are now accepting 2018. I would expect that the 2024 version of that has to either be out there or will be soon. We are not going to spend the time that is probably warranted on creating guidance documents for what you need to modify in the 2018 version of the EJCDC ESAs, because the 2024 or 25 will be here. I mean, maybe it is here and I just don't even know that it's here. We will spend time on that to create a guidance document that will make it easier for you guys to use. As it stands now, though, we're going to just keep providing the guidance document upon request for the 2013 EJCDC ESAs. The only real thing that means is, in our guidance document, we've given you specific locations to insert specific language. Those locations are different from 13 to 18. Not necessarily wildly so, but instead of Article 12.3.6, it might be Article 12.2. We being the construction engineers and everyone whom that impacts, can work together to figure out where that location is. Do it one time, you'll never have to do it again, kind of a deal. We just don't have the freeboard to create 2 new guidance documents in the next 12 months, so we're not going to. Amendments may require federal requirement. So many consulting firms follow the EJCDC ESA guidance exactly, whereas you turn in the full C520, I think that is, at the front end, and then amend it for step 2 or step 3 by just adding exhibit K, which is the amendment exhibit. If you don't have all of the federal cross cutters in your step 1 or 2 EJC to ESA, you may need to add them if you're only providing an exhibit K for step 3. That happens fairly rarely, but often enough that, the firms that are only supplying an amendment as exhibit K may need to also amend it with federal cross-cutter language, which we can provide to you. The bill signage is not required any longer. That seems to have not
That's not
been
updated.
updated. Yeah, so that whole
I
thing,
saw it. It
yeah.
was in the slides you sent. Pretty sure. I was
Well,
like,
whether
oh,
it
it's not
was or
required.
wasn't, doesn't matter.
That's right. I can
Yeah,
add it on.
doesn't matter. So bill signage has been pulled back, as has that Invest in America brand guy. See, this is a perfect update. I'm showing you guys what was up there last year, and now I'm showing that, hey, it's no longer an issue. So you do still need a project sign. And however, it's the project sign that we used 2 years ago and 3 years ago and 4 years ago. We have supplemental language in our guidance document that's available upon request for anyone that doesn't know what that looks like, but it's just pulling all of the BIL language back out of it, turning it into a clean water SRF sign or a DW SRF sign, and padding a new administration on the back for it. And that's it for the sign. No more bill stuff and no more brand guide and no more controllers alert. But or Vermont clean water sign. And that's that fancy little blue one that goes as an addition or all by itself. It's in my kid's school's parking lot all by itself. Up with projects for that. There is a new expiration date on the SF 1444, which is the classification request. I do believe that the old one says, or the new one says that any previous versions can be used. It's only a pain, and this only applies to consulting engineers. If I have to go in and pull all of Roger's stuff out and put mine in, not that big of a pain, but it'd be great if everyone was using the current one. That I think maybe is online.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. So you can find it online on our website. I think that's the only slide I had, but Patrick can flip and tell me if I'm right or wrong. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
So currently, we're still waiting for our allotment for the overflow sewer grant. The project has currently not been selected, but will be selected from projects that are listed on the current intended use plan. Requirements for that grant are for a rural and financially disadvantaged community with a preference for green stormwater infrastructure. And then in terms of the other grants that DCE helps to facilitate, there are no other proposed changes.
All right. Thanks. Right, so that is our presentation. We're happy to take any questions on the presentation materials, anything in the intended use plans. Following this, and that starting at 11, we'll receive public comments. If we get through the questions before 11, we can certainly also start taking any public comments that folks want to provide. Again, those can be submitted in writing. We always appreciate that, and also encourage anyone who wants to do it verbally here today as well. So started, any questions for folks in the room?
That's how thorough you are.
Stupefied by boredom. All right, moving on next. Any raised, do we have any, folks could, if they're able, use the raise hand function if you're on Teams. If that doesn't work for you, you're also more than welcome to just unmute your mic and say hello. See, stop sharing. Maybe that'll help. Oh, okay. Great. Thanks, Liz. Good morning. What can we do for you?
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak after hearing that presentation. I have a bunch of comments, and then there's probably some questions in those comments that you don't have to answer now. Just still developing fluency and familiarity with the program. So I'm Liz Curry, and I'm a consultant with a number of manufactured home communities that are organized as limited equity co-ops and receive technical assistance from the Cooperative Development Institute. They have also started a water infrastructure support program through a USDA TA grant, and along with other colleagues like Addison Housing Works and HFI, we form a group of TA providers that are part of the Manufactured Home Community Subcommittee of the Housing and Homeless Alliance of Vermont. So I'm here as a consultant with a number of clients that are manufactured home communities that are using or have used the SRF program, and wanted to provide some perspective on this subcategory of borrowers. There's over 20,000 manufactured home owners in Vermont, and 30% of those folks live in parks. So about 6,000 manufactured homeowners live in parks. And I don't have off the top of my head how many nonprofits parks are owned, but there's about 16 or 17 co-op parks. So it is very typical for these parks when the nonprofits or residents buy them to inherit very old legacy water and wastewater infrastructure that has not been either originally designed and permitted according to any regulations or overseen within a regulatory framework unless there's a health and safety emergency. And so purchasing those systems puts a real financial burden on the folks who live there, generally most of whom have very low incomes, and then they have to take on find the financial investment to fix them. A number of you are familiar with some of these projects. So I wanted to just express appreciation and support for some of the work you've done to create some environmental justice provisions in the IUP. After reading it for the past 3 years, it's great to see some of the points we've raised as a subcommittee included in the IUP, specifically Section 2.2 Goals 1, 3, and 5, and Section 2.3 Short-Term Goals 1 and 2, as well as 6. And we do appreciate the recent engagement by you all to talk with us in terms of how the program can be more user-friendly and adapted to manufactured home communities. And I will say that the manufactured home community needs are circumspect. You can quantify them, and they are, going to be time limited over the next 10 years, but still, unlike your primary customer municipalities, which have ongoing new and renewed issues, which we understand the program was originally designed for primarily municipalities. But the MHC sector is quantifiable. It has, a group of needs that will be met by investments that are large, large capital investments. But once that's done, then you're done. They don't really need to come back if done right the first time. So I think that's one of the advantages of looking at this sector as a subsector, as a customer that is really worth your time engaging with, especially due to environmental justice, Vermont's environmental justice law. I just wanted to call out a couple things because I also read the Maine 2025 IUP, which which I think can be a model for Vermont in many ways, not saying their programs necessarily fully a model, but just in terms of the ability for non-municipal customers to see some benefits in that IUP. Specifically, they did clearly call out that the bipartisan infrastructure law supplemental grant mandates 49% of the supplemental cap grant to be delivered as subsidy. They clearly called that out in their IUP, and that was helpful because it just provides the reader with a little bit of a roadmap about this new, albeit time-limited opportunity, but it just is helpful to have that. And the EPA website indicates states can use 31% of that as a set aside. And the reason I bring that up is because I think we've had these conversations before that Vermont statute needs, authorizes municipalities to be eligible for disadvantaged community status, and that's it. And that's my understanding, is that it's just municipalities that are allowed to be eligible for that status. So in your Section 8 under additional subsidy, it's only municipalities that are eligible for that, if I'm understanding correctly, and I may not be understanding correctly at all, but it's my understanding that only municipalities or municipally sponsored projects can be eligible for the entire kind of like subsidy opportunity and disadvantaged community status. So this seems to be where we get hung up with the MHC sector in terms of many of these parks facing severe constraints financially because they have a kind of a captive population, very low income people. Many times, at least 50 or 60% of the folks who live in these parks earn, between $24,000 to $38,000 because many are seniors, fixed incomes, or just working in wage jobs like being able to work in the summer for a road paving crew, but taking unemployment in the winter. There's just our Vermont's working class, working poor workforce lives in these parks. And that's a kind of categorically different financial proposition than municipalities, where you can spread, even in disadvantaged municipalities, you can spread the cost of a rate structure over a broader income population. They have a wider range of incomes, and so there's a way you can create equitable rate structures. Not so in manufactured home communities, and I think you're aware of some parks, particularly Addison Housing Works, that can't even afford the debt without lot rents going into a tier that's unaffordable, exceeding the state median mobile home park lot rent. So financially, the constraints that these parks face warrant, I think, your time and investment in looking at the state statute, if that's where the barrier lies, for allowing disadvantaged community status to be given to a group of parks, or meeting some criteria that's just not necessarily municipally sponsored. It is not tenable or feasible for any of us to organize a bond vote with a municipality. This is beyond reason, I think, in terms of a capacity expectation. So another suggestion there is that if there's a way to use the EPA set aside category as either a workaround to the state statute, or if you could ask the legislature for authority to create set-asides outside of the municipal eligibility criteria, then you would have the flexibility to work with us to say, okay, we got this BIL, one-time great grant for Vermont that has this new flexibility that allows subsidy. Why don't we use our authority to create a set aside of like $5 million, or $3 million, whatever, because it's not like you see 10 parks a year come through your program. You see like one or two that can, get to the point of construction. So if you could get authority to create set asides that are not municipalities, that might be a way that we all could move forward together on trying to address some of the acute financial needs that some of these parks have. Not all of them have acute financial needs. Some can support the debt. And so if you had a set aside, you could create a mini loan pool to look and spread that across the pool. We are all collegial. We don't compete with each other. We all look at the state as nonprofit and limited equity co-ops as one portfolio. We all are serving the same folks that live in those parks. It's not like anybody's going to begrudge Addison Housing Works for getting a straight out grant when St. George can afford some debt. That's fine. I mean, if you could create a set aside of a pool that blends the funds and gives the grants to those who need it, and put the interest rate on those who don't. And by the way, thank you for changing the interest rate, if that is intended for mobile home parks, to the 1.5%. That would become a standard request of all of us anyway. So appreciate that gesture. Oh, the other thing is, just from a public reading the IUP perspective, in the sources and uses table, it was confusing how your commitments exceed your available funding. So if there's any way to clarify that, I'm sure there's an explanation. It was on page 13. Notice that you're not using the TA set aside. So I don't know, or the carve out 2%, whatever. I don't know like what the implications are of that in terms of providing TA, but it just seems like, we've all, those of us who use the ARPA Healthy Homes for Manufactured Communities program have benefited very much, especially from Rosalie Sharp's assistance and support. And she's, done things like helped us navigate the SRF. She's done things like get ahead of the curve by sending PERs to the appropriate people in your program when we're going into the step 2 process. And losing that little bit of TA, I mean, it's a lot for us, it might, but hopefully it's a little for you, would be a shame. So I hope you're making provision for sustaining that role. It's been very helpful. The other thing is just listening to Don and having been through construction engineer one project, it would be great to see your constructioneers have more support, and the TA pool might be an opportunity to subcontract some construction engineering just for specific types of projects like mobile home parks or other projects, to subcontract that out so that you can supplement your CE folks. So I think that's all. Oh yeah. John was talking about the EJCDC ESA guidance, and we do work with engineers who are not trained in SRF, and it's, no offense to any engineers on the call, but it's not fun. And so but it's very few engineers will work with these parks. And when they do, they go up a huge learning curve, and then they know what to expect and know what to anticipate. That doesn't mean they're necessarily familiar with or fond of the EJC documents, but it'd be tremendously helpful if you would put whatever you were talking about, Don, just put it on your website so we can grab it, like to do it upon request. We work, there's many of us work in the world of, delivering affordable housing development and finance. It doesn't, like the EJCDC is unfamiliar to us in a way that AIA may not be. And so it doesn't always occur to us to say to the engineer, oh, hey, did you get exhibit K, or do we have the base contract that has the right language? And, that's just a little bit foreign to those of us who work outside of the, kind of typical water, wastewater engineering sector. So if you just could put it on your website, that'd be great. And then we could just grab it there.
Just in response to that, we don't actually have it. We don't store or house or own a copy of the EJCDC. I agree, that would be great, but I think it's against the licensing.
You said the guidance would be available upon request, but it's not easy to remember to ask for it.
Yeah, that's only a 1-page supplemental thing. It's not the contract.
No, I know. That's great. Just put the guidance on your website. Then we don't have to remember to track you down for one more thing. It's there.
Got it.
And then we can just develop a system of, grabbing it every time we do an EJCDC. I
Liz?
think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks,
Liz.
Could you please clarify if your IEP comments relate to the clean water IEP, the drinking water IEP, or both?
Yeah.
I only
and
read
just
the- I only read the clean water one because it's the more gnarly one with the municipal requirement. The drinking water is great. It's great to work with the drinking water SRF. But the municipal, condition is a barrier, and we will go in the legislature next year and ask for, a workaround for that too. Thank you.
All right, yeah, just for everyone's benefit, and Lynette's question was clarifying that on the clean water side, borrowers do need to be a municipality in order to be eligible for subsidy slash, principal forgiveness. That's not, on the drinking water side, non-municipal borrowers are eligible for subsidy.
And Patrick, it's my understanding that's not a federal requirement, right?
Well, the restriction on the clean water side, I don't think
It's federal.
is it federal?
I don't
I
know
know it's
about
in
that.
state statute. I don't know about.
Yeah, it's in state statute, but other states, it's not. So we would appreciate clarification on that, because if it really is federal statute, that's significantly different than if it's just the state.
No, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's something for us to look into.
Thank you.
And on the technical assistance, and I appreciate your comments. And again, for everyone's benefit, the final intended use plan will respond to all comments. On the technical assistance piece, that's on the clean water side, we are allowed to take up to 2% of the grants and use it for contracting out for technical assistance. We haven't done that. So it was creating some administrative challenges in terms of bookkeeping. And also, administering those contracts was taking resources we didn't have. And we also have a high demand on the project side. So when we divert funds to technical assistance, it comes, essentially out of the funding line for projects. With all that said, that doesn't mean we can't do it in the future. Essentially, it's like on the drinking water side where we can bank our authority related to set-asides. If we were to choose to use those funds in future years, and we reserve that ability in the intended use plan, we can do that. It would just come out of a future year's grant. So yeah, if we have the internal capacity and clear need, that's an option in the future. Any other? I can.
Patrick, that question in the chat.
Yeah. So from Kirsten, why has planning subsidy for septic receiving facilities been eliminated? There are communities that want to support septic receiving facilities at their treatment facilities, but the cost to plan, design, and construct is an obstacle. Every little bit helps, and without the subsidy, it seems as if the state is not supportive of communities providing septic receiving. On the clean water side, we've consolidated our subsidy offerings for planning and design. They're essentially being one category at 50%. So there is still loan principal forgiveness available for projects that are going that route. It's not 100%, but it's still significant at 50%. So not eliminated, but I hear your point, and we would love to be able to offer 100% subsidy for all projects. We just need to spread it out based on what we have available and the total universe of need. I don't know if anyone else on the team wants to anything else to say on that, or
you nailed it.
right. One other comment from Liz. Perhaps another workaround to the municipal requirement in 24 VSAs to give step 1 and 2 the high financial need MHCs as grants and not roll those into permanent loan. Yeah, we can look into that. Programs, I understand it, we haven't used the SRF funds as grants. I do believe that's a possibility. I don't know how that approach would align with the statutory requirement to prioritize municipalities if in the end the net effect is the same. But certainly open to having that conversation. Any other comments in the room or questions or online?
Patrick, I have a question.
Yeah.
Regarding the Whisper program, if at the end of the fiscal year, if there's flexibility or opportunity above the funding level to increase the amount from 10% of a loan application, is that possible?
Yeah, so I mean, if a given project is on the
It's
priority
more
list,
than-
say for $1 million, they're saying, oh, yes, we want to do Whisper, so now it's going to be more than $1 million.
Right.
Yes, that's an option. I mean, the priority list, I mean, obviously those applications are submitted well before, you know, the IUP is adopted and before the project goes out to bid. So there is often some level of adjustment, and we can, you know, provided there's available funds, we can, you know, increase the loan amount.
Okay, so for instance, if a project value is at $15 million and the Whisper project is $3 million, could it go up to a 20% of the loan amount? In that case, or can you not go beyond 10% at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 10%, and it's, you know, because otherwise you'd be reducing the admin fee even lower.
We'd have to pay you.
Yeah, we'd have to pay you to take it. Yeah.
Okay, we have another question. Is it still too early to chat about municipal systems regarding Killington and loans for people like me in the hotel business regarding hooking up to the municipal system coming next year?
I think the answer is yes, it's a little too early. We are having internal discussions about that. And stay tuned, there'll be more information coming.
Okay, did you want to expand upon your question at all? Right. Well, it's just 11 now, so I'll certainly keep the meeting, the public hearing open for a bit in case we get anyone who was joining just for public comment, not for the presentation. But otherwise, you know, so more than welcome to stick around, but otherwise I think we're relatively concluded. Additional subsidy. Okay. Thank you, Liz. If you're still online, Lynette's pointed out she's at one of EPA's websites, and their summary on additional subsidies notes that the recipient must be a municipality or intermunicipal, interstate, or state agency. So I think we'll have to do some additional head scratching on that one to you know, find the best approach. Thanks.
All right.
Finished early again. Yeah. Just gonna mute the room for the sake of the recording and wait and see if we get any additional comments.
Another deadline.
Thank you.
Comments, in case they think of something later.